Welcome to the Caregiver Relief Podcast, where we bring you conversations that empower, inform, and inspire family caregivers and healthcare advocates. I'm Diane Carbo, your host. This episode is sponsored by myvitalvault.net, your all-in-one life organizer for aging adults and caregivers. It's designed to help you securely store your essential legal, medical, and emergency information in one easy-to-access place. Because when a crisis hits, being prepared can make all the difference. Join our Caregiver Relief community, a warm, welcoming space where you can connect with other caregivers, ask questions, share stories, and find support from people who truly understand. Visit community.caregiverrelief.com to join now, because caregiving is one of the hardest and most meaningful things you'll ever do, and no one should have to do it alone. And if this episode speaks to you, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. Every click helps us reach more caregivers who need encouragement, resources, and hope. Today's episode is one that can change many lives. We're honored to be joined by Dr. Sota Omoigui, a board-certified anesthesiologist, pain medicine specialist, and independent translation researcher who has received over 1,000 citations for his scientific work. On July 4th, 2024, Dr. Sota announced a discovery being called a paradigm shift in sickle cell care, an approach that moves from reactive hospital-based crisis treatment to early intervention at home using oxygen therapy. His breakthrough may offer the first true solution in over 7,300 years to prevent and stop sickle cell crises, saving lives, reducing suffering, and restoring hope to families around the world. So I'm going to dive in right now, and we're going to learn about this powerful story and discovery. Dr. Sota, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to share this amazing information. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to specialize in pain medicine?
Thank you, Diane. I realized that pain medicine was one of the last frontiers in medicine, and that there was still a lot to be achieved in pain. And so my first project was to try and find out the origin of pain, which is what happens from the time you get a cut on your finger to where you feel it as pain in your brain. And mankind has tried to try to solve this puzzle since we walked on Earth for 300,000 years. And Plato tried it 400 BC. Descartes tried it, gave his own theory 1644 AD. Melzack and Wall provided their own theory in 1965. But none of their theories withstood the test of time. In 2002, after going through the literature as a translational researcher, what I do is to evaluate existing research and see if I can find a pattern, see if I can find the various pieces of the jigsaw puzzle and put the puzzle together. 2002, I published my theory called the biochemical origin of pain. And there I identified the inflammatory chemical called calcitonin gene-related peptide, CGRP, as being one of the major chemicals responsible for migraine. And 17 years later, the FDA approved the first drugs to treat migraine by blocking CGRP. So,
Oh, wow.
so from 300,000 years, from my attempt to try and solve a problem 300,000 years old, I now segued to sickle cell, which is 7,300 years old. So that's quite a baby compared to 300,000 years old. So my goal is to do research, just like JFK said, where we sent a man to the moon, with Americans, we do it not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And
Yes.
I have try to work on things that are not easy, not difficult, but nearly impossible. And that is what I have tried to solve. So I've taken one step further than GFK to try to solve the impossible. And sickle cell has been what you can call impossible. It has really been a plague on mankind for 7,300 years. And even in the last 100 years of modern medicine, we have not had any solutions. But yet,
Yes.
the solutions have been hiding in plain sight in the literature. And that's the amazing thing about this. And I will go through and identify how sickle cell first discovered in 1910 by Herrick, and where he observed sickle cells in the blood of a dental student. And then in 1927, Han and Gillespie suggested that hypoxia or a low oxygen environment caused the sickling of red blood cells. A major breakthrough. Now, 3 years later, Scriven and Wall in Canada reported that the number of sickle cells in the blood may be varied by the change of the partial oxygen pressure, and that this was a reversible reaction. Bang, that's when light bulbs went off in my head. The key word was this could be a reversible reaction. So I went further in my analysis and found more literature that proved that point. In 1983, Frank and Chu stated that deoxygenated reversible sickle cells possess the ability to go back to their normal discoid shape upon reoxygenation. So what happens is that in a sickle cell crisis, the initial period of the crisis is reversible. You have reversible sickle cells. So in a low oxygen environment, they're what we, in the scientific language, we say they polymerize. They become sticky and rigid and change their shape, so they are no longer able to transit through blood vessels. But the initial period, if they see oxygen, is like a CPR for those cells. If they see oxygen within that initial period, they'll go back to normal. They start flowing like normal cells. But what happens is that if they don't see oxygen with repeated sickling and unsickling, eventually the cell membrane, the cell wall gets damaged. And then when the cell wall gets damaged, the cell essentially dies. And a dead cell, like a dead human being, does not respond to oxygen. And this is why that by the time patients get to the hospital, which is the normal current paradigm of treatment, oxygen no longer works. And that's how the sickle cell disease fooled modern medicine for 100 years, that oxygen doesn't work. Because by the time they got to the hospital, they were already in an irreversible sickle cell crisis. The cells were damaged. Now, continuing in 1991, Robert Hebel stated that the phospholipid part of the cell membrane, when it's initially altered from the initial reversible sickling, can go back to normal if it sees oxygen. Again, 1991. So we have all of these researchers talking about the reversibility of the initial sickling. And one curious thing was that in 2015, Melanie Gonick at MIT released a video on YouTube of their basic science work called Predicting the Behavior of Sickle Cells. And the whole purpose of their lab and their video was to assist in the work of anti-sickling drugs, like hydroxyurea. And what their video shows, and it's on YouTube, called Predicting Behavior of Sickle Cells, show that they show the sickle cells initially with a bent shape, a sickle shape, but when they see oxygen, they go back to normal and they start flowing normal. So the question was this, and this was where Big Pharma missed the whole thing, is that Big Pharma has been looking for a medication when the solution is a gas, and not a gas in the hospital, but a gas at home in the golden half hour, which is the first 30 minutes of a sickle cell crisis, when the cells are still reversible. And I have to give credit to Big Pharma. They spent hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. I point to the drug Adagvil by Novartis, a $665 million drug that they produced. And what does that drug do? It's a monoclonal antibody to P-selectin to essentially act when the irreversibly sickle cells create an inflammatory reaction by attaching to the lining of the blood vessels.
That's fascinating to me. I've been a nurse, as I told you, for over 50 years. And so I've seen sickle cell crisis many times over my lifetime as a nurse. And it's horrific. And when I first went into nursing, now 50 years ago, most people didn't live beyond their teens with this, not many. And now I see that they're living longer, but I'm giggling when you say Big Pharma spent all this money and they ignored the most important thing, but they couldn't make money on a simple little tool that's not only affordable, but it can be kept at home and addressed very early. So
that's very correct. So Novartis, they passed phase 1 trials, they passed phase 2 trials, they went into the market, and in the market, they found out that patients with sickle cell had more crises on Adagvil than on placebo. So the European Medical Agency revoked their approval, the UK Medical Agency revoked their approval, and the approval is hanging by a thread in the United States. And
I'm just excited that you have found the golden half hour is so critical, and it's so affordable, and it keeps them from having a crisis. So I hope that the U.S. will also revoke after a period of time when they see your solution. Can you tell me how the medical community is responding to your discovery so far?
Well, my discovery, because Nigeria in Africa is the epicenter of sickle cell disease in the world, with about 5 to 10 million patients with sickle cell disease.
Wow. Yes.
So I did present my discovery in the US, and I also presented it in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, my initial, when I presented my discovery on July 4, 2024, and where I stated that let oxygen be your medicine. Just like Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine, I said for sickle cell, let oxygen be your medicine. In Nigeria, it's been remarkable. There are many of the patients now. We have at least 100 patients who have oxygen cylinders, oxygen concentrators, and we have testimonies on the website, sicklecelldiscovery.com, and you have little kids going into a crisis, they put on their oxygen. A couple of hours later, they're back playing. What will normally have sent them to the hospital for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is prevented. We've prevented hundreds of blood transfusions, hundreds of hospitalizations, hundreds of pain and crises. It's been dramatic. You just need to read the testimonies on the website to see how lives have been transformed. For the first time, they have a gas that can prevent and stop the crisis in the golden half hour.
That's fascinating to me because it's such a simple solution. And like I said, I've seen young children and older adults in crisis, and it's awful. Their lives are very restricted. So to do this, to give them a better quality of life, what does a family need to have in place to use early oxygen therapy effectively at home? And how do they get it how do they get their doctors to learn more about your approach?
The doctors can learn more. They can go on the website, sicklecelldiscovery.com. I have all my research articles there and all my publications. I was an advisor to the FDA on anesthetics and life support drugs. I'm a recipient of an FDA Advisory Committee Award. So they can see the whole scientific background. They can see all my references. They are all on the website. And for the families, they just need oxygen. Those in Africa, because an oxygen cylinder is much cheaper and the refill of the gas is much cheaper, they use that. But in the US, home oxygen concentrators that meet our specifications, which means continuous flow, not pulse dose, 1.5 to 2 liters per minute, oxygen purity of 90% plus or minus 3% at all flow rates, are about $500 to $600. So the doctors can prescribe that. If the doctors are not enthused on the idea, they can contact me through my website. I'll do a telecall with them and I'll prescribe it for them. But for just a $500 home oxygen, they can prevent all the terrible sequelae of a sickle cell crisis. So what I've come to do is to change the paradigm from a reactive approach, waiting for the patient to get into a crisis in the hospital, to a preventive symptomatic approach where the parent, the family, and the patient become their own first responder, and where we decentralize power from the hospital to the home, and we preserve their dignity and their health.
Yeah. I worked on both sides of the fence in healthcare. I did nursing, and I also worked on the insurance side. And I was a care manager. So I often had insurance companies. I would ask insurance companies to go out of contract for things. I can't imagine that our insurance industry, even Medicaid, would prefer to provide an oxygen unit in the home, an oxygen concentrator in the home to meet your specifications, than to have to, because it would avoid, to me, they're avoiding a hospital admission. They're avoiding serious, very expensive medications that nobody can afford and probably are going to be denied for most sickle cell patients. So I can see this as being something that everybody would want to jump on board with and promote, because it's just being proactive instead of reactive to a healthcare crisis.
That is true. Actually, in 2016, as an article, I have a reference on the website, Medicare spent $811.6 million on all the complications in a single year of sickle cell crisis. Now, remember, a full crisis leads to other complications, a vascular necrosis of the hips that needs a hip transplant, a hip replacement. It ends up in a stroke. It ends up in end-stage renal disease, kidney failure. It ends up with acute chest syndrome. It ends up with a lot of very terrible complications that a simple $500 home oxygen concentrator can prevent. And let me tell you, Ms. Diane, once that sickle cell has become irreversible and attaches to the lining of the blood vessel, it's a very complex inflammatory cascade that happens. Multiple inflammatory chemical mediators, and that's why Big Pharma has a problem in trying to find a magic bullet, because at the point you're trying to find a magic bullet, the train has left the station.
Yes. I know Big Pharma very well, and I find it disgusting because it's all about greed and it's not about what's best for patients. And here you have a simple solution. And that's why I felt a need to have you interview you today, because I think it's going to take a grassroots effort to put the word out, because Big Pharma will try to fight this or ignore it or prevent you from being successful at promoting this some way. I just think that's the way they work. But I think that if my family caregivers and the healthcare advocates out there know somebody with sickle cell, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be announced from the rooftops that we have a solution, simple, financially easy, affordable symptom that can prevent so much and cost. Do you know what the average sickle cell crisis costs would cost a crisis to occur? What the cost is for it in a hospital?
Depending on the complications, degree of hospitalization, the blood transfusions, and of course there'll be on oxygen then when oxygen doesn't work. So you're looking at thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And
that's what I thought.
You need a hip replacement, then you have all of that you get. And I have to give Big Pharma credit. They've really worked and tried. One of the major advances was the drug called hydroxyurea, which essentially increases the level of hemoglobin F. And how does it, how did hemoglobin F evolve from nature? Hemoglobin F evolved for fetal hemoglobin to allow the fetus in the uterus, which is a hypoxic environment, to allow the fetus to be able to transfer oxygen to its hemoglobin, because hemoglobin F has a higher oxygen affinity. So oxygen is mentioned over and over again. The words, and again, and another point which has eluded most physicians and patients is that in sickle cell, the most dangerous time for a crisis is during sleep. It's called nocturnal hypoxemia, because during sleep it's a low oxygen environment. That's why most crises occur and wake them up at night. But I've seen articles in New York Times and CNN where the patients are afraid. They think there's a demon coming at 2 to 3 a.m. to come and stab them with knives. But the problem was that nobody was looking at the literature. Hargrave et al., Chang et al., attributed nocturnal hypoxemia to sickle cell crisis, because during sleep there's shallow breathing, nasal vascular congestion, so the amount of oxygen taken is less. So for a normal person, sleep is restorative, but for a patient with sickle cell, sleep is the runway to a terrible sickle cell crisis. And with an oxygen concentrator or oxygen cylinder, if they have any daytime stressors, they just need to put on their oxygen, and that solves the problem. Miss Diane, I can tell you that I would liken my discovery to the isolation of insulin in 1921 by Banfield in Canada. And diabetes was a uniformly fatal disease, killing people in their 20s and 30s. There are a lot of discoveries we take for granted today, where people 100 years ago were dying. So with the isolation of insulin, it made diabetes a manageable disease.
Yes.
It wasn't cured, it was manageable. So the same thing, my discovery of home oxygen in the golden half hour has come to make sickle cell a manageable disease, no different from diabetes or high blood pressure. The only difference is oxygen is the medication.
You were talking that you were speaking about sickle cell crises happen a lot at night because there's low oxygen. Do you encourage people with sickle cell to wear an oxygen mask or a CPAP or a BiPAP or something during sleep?
No, it's not. It's not even as complicated as that. All they need is a nasal cannula.
Just a nasal cannula?
1.5 to 2 liters per minute. If they've had any stressful day, stress could be environmental, excess heat, excess cold, high altitude. It could be intellectual, studying for an exam. It could be physical, very hard, strenuous day. Then they just sleep with oxygen. And actually on the website, you have testimonies of different patients who have been using home oxygen. Some of them just use the oxygen for 1 hour before they go to sleep. So they've been able to find out different ways that they can use the home oxygen. Some sleep with it when as necessary. to use it as needed. Now, people have asked, oh, is there any oxygen toxicity? Legonoid Arm did a study of home oxygen for children for 5 years, and there was no toxic effect because nasal cannula oxygen is 24% oxygen at 1 liter per minute and 28% oxygen at 2 liters per minute. And the oxygen we breathe in is 21%. So this is really what we call low flow oxygen.
Okay.
Yeah. And what does an oxygen concentrator do? It's a machine that takes in air, absorbs nitrogen in the seed bed, and breathes out oxygen. Why? Because the air we breathe in is 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and 1% rare gases. So if you have a special material that absorbs nitrogen, then what you get is mostly oxygen. So it's just a very simple device.
Yes. Life is very stressful, and I can't imagine children out and play, wanting to be out and play in the heat or the cold. And that's what happened often. They would come in, they'd be playing, and they would have a crisis. I know that dehydration is another cause, which is easily solvable with just drinking, making sure you keep hydrated. And that's a big thing everywhere. Everybody's carrying their water around with them so that they stay hydrated. God forbid we go a few minutes without a drink in our hands. But this is extraordinary. Now, I read where people that flying can be a challenge for somebody with sickle cell because of the low oxygen level on the plane. How do you resolve that? Do you now you're telling me, and what I'm understanding is you're telling me that just an hour or two before bedtime, or if you need it, or when you feel like you've had a stressful day, can help you avoid a crisis just by being proactive.
Yeah, and flight time is a very dangerous time because aircraft are pressurized to 8,000 feet. And at those levels, patients with sickle cell will desaturate starting within 10 minutes of takeoff of the aircraft.
Wow.
They desaturate down to 77%, whereas the normal saturation is 95 to 100. And this was a hidden factor in a lot of mortality and morbidity of patients with sickle cell who were going on long-distance trips, short-distance trips, without understanding the danger they were in. And the ignorance is so astounding. Even the National Institutes of Health recommended that patients with sickle cell should put on warm clothes and drink lots of fluids because they fail to understand at the highest levels of research in the United States government that a low oxygen hypoxic environment is a precursor to a sickle cell crisis. So there are many patients who died after flights, a few who died during the flight, a few who had a vascular necrosis of the hip after a flight because the knowledge wasn't there. So that part of my discovery is to bring this knowledge. And what needs to be done? Aircraft should provide compressed medical oxygen. They used to do that, or airlines used to do that upon request. Oxygen is like $10 to $20. But airlines in the United States are requiring patients to bring FAA-approved portable oxygen concentrators that cost $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. And they now have to bring 4, 5, 6 lithium-ion batteries, which are even dangerous to the aircraft, which makes no sense. European airlines, British Airways, Air France provide compressed medical oxygen. And I've tried to discuss with the Department of Transportation to compel the U.S. airlines to once again provide compressed medical oxygen to patients who need it. It's part of the Americans with Disability Act. But I'm yet to succeed in that. But air travel, anywhere there's a low oxygen environment, precursor to a sickle cell crisis, the literature is there, the basic science is there. We just need to put everything together.
So what steps are being taken to make this discovery accessible and recognized across global healthcare systems?
I've given several Zoom lectures to try to educate doctors, especially in Nigeria, a few in the United States, This discovery is just a little bit above a year old. So it's a whole of society movement to get knowledge out. And what I would tell people, because I've had different people come with their own different theories of this drug and that drug. I say, you know what? The proof of any theory are the patients.
Yes.
Whatever you can do, phase 1, phase 2, but if phase 3 takes you out of the market, then that means you didn't work. The proof of oxygen, home oxygen, is out there now on the Sickle Cell Discovery website. It's as simple as that.
Unbelievable. So what is your vision for the future of sickle cell care, and how can caregivers, patients, and medical professionals support that shift?
Be a tremendous shift. It will save millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. It will save patients pain and suffering. What is a normal treatment when they have a crisis? The irreversible cells, the cell walls are damaged, the cells die, they obstruct the blood vessels, and the body has to clear these obstructed blood vessels by destroying the cells. So what do you have after a crisis? The hemoglobin drops. And then when the hemoglobin drops, then what is it? It's a blood transfusion. And so it's like a cat chasing the tail or a dog chasing the tail, going from one complication to another. Whereas in the golden half hour of oxygen, all of this is avoided.
Yes.
All of that.
Now, presentations to insurance companies. They should, especially the bean counters, because they would hear your information and go back at the auditors and look and see what the costs are that they've spent on this, and look at it compared to what you're offering as such a it's just truly cost effective and simple solution. It could save them hundreds of millions of dollars in providing care while providing a quality of life for the patient.
Exactly. If you listen to this, if you read the testimonies, the little kids start playing, the student finishes the exam. I have patients whose fathers who say, yes, their child could not finish an exam without going into a crisis. Now with home oxygen, they finish the exam, they're doing well, they come home, they have their lives. It's a paradigm shift then.
Yes, yes. And that's why I had to have you on to help start promoting this, because there's so much out there. There's so much pain. And we have a public health crisis where most people that are with sickle cell may become disabled or are on disability. And that insurance is very limited to what they want to pay. So I would think those disability insurance carriers would say, and the managed care companies would say, we need you to come talk to us. We need you to help us and get the word out, because it's just amazing. I'm just very impressed by it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm available. I'm happy to meet with them. I'm happy to present the science to them. I'm happy to present all the literature. And I'm happy to present the patients, the ultimate proof of any theory or of any discovery. And they can reach me through the website, sicklecelldiscovery.com. I have my WhatsApp platform there. My email address is medicinechief@aol.com. They can reach me through my email, medicinechief, one word, or through the website. I'm happy to present, because this is no different from the isolation of insulin for patients with diabetes.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yes, sir. I want to thank you so much for your time. And to my listeners out there, I just want you to know all Dr. Soto's information will be at the bottom of it, at the page. And I create a permanent page, sir, so that you will be able, so with people perusing through my site will be able to find you and find the information. So
thank you, Ms. Diane. Thank you for all the work you are doing to bring the health information out to people. Yes. You're doing a great job, and I commend you for it. Thank you.
I'm just a messenger. You're the amazing person here, and I'm so grateful that I was made aware of you. Tara Slaughter made me aware of you, and I said, "Oh, I've got to talk to that man," because, like I said, I'm an old nurse, and I've seen the terrible complications of sickle cell. And I just think this is such an easy solution. To my family caregivers out there, you are the most important part of the caregiving equation. Without you, it all falls apart. So please learn to be gentle with yourself. Practice self-care every day because you are worth it.